Well, on behalf of the Planning Board of the Town of West Newbury, I call the West Newbury Planning Board meeting of August 6th, 2024 to order at 7 p.m. And I suspect somebody from the Select Board will do the same on behalf of the Select Board.
Yeah, call the meeting to order at 6:59.
Okay.
All right, now the first item now we can take agenda items out of order, but the first one on the planning board agenda is to deal with 125 River Road. So if there's no objections, let's go ahead and do that. Yes? Okay.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, we have three sub items here. We've got the performance bond and surety, we've got maintenance agreements, and we have the decision. The performance bond and surety. I saw in our materials that were sent out that we had a number. And I'm wondering if Mr. Kelly would carry did you prepare that, Dave?
If you're looking at a spreadsheet that's
Yes.
or a PDF at the top of it that says 8/1/2024.
Yes, let me
Yep,
just share that.
That's the one.
Yep, can everybody see this?
Yes.
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 Is it big enough to read it?
Yes.
Yeah, it is now. Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Well, that's a big number, 413,000,
Yes.
but it's believable. That's a lot of site work to do there. Now, Sue's there, right?
Yep, I am.
Great, Sue. Do we have a mechanism for this?
So, I have not received it unless it came in between 4 and 6. Mr. Fusco is on the line. I was in touch with, Mr. Fusco and his engineer or his general contractor who said he was going to prepare the bond, and I instructed him he had some questions about it. I instructed him to get in touch with David, and I don't know if he did. I have not heard since then. Do you have anything? Did you hear from him, David?
I did. I spoke to Mark Fiscal and we talked about the number and explained the reason, how it was calculated, what it represents, how the, what he needs to post, and then what the mechanism is to start getting the funds back. And I basically explained that this is posted such that should the developer contractor walk, the town has the ability to hire somebody to complete the work, and explained that as he's doing the work out there, once he believes he has certain portions of the work done, to notify planning board / Meridian. We'll take a walk out there, we'll look at the work, prepare a letter back to the board saying, yep, this work has been done, this much money, the bond can get released, and then he can get that money back. So it's a mechanism to encourage him to get the work done sooner than later. And he said that he was going to talk to who he needed to get that bond posted. And that was the last I heard from him.
Yeah, Mr. Fusco, do you have anything to add on that? Apparently not. It looks like.
So the bond is going through ETS insurance through Fidelity. It has. Yeah.
I can't hear.
Sorry?
Yeah, we've got kind of a shaky internet connection.
Can you hear me?
Mr. Fusco, we can hear you, but your photo is stuck and the audio is intermittent.
Diego, I was going to say, if you cut your video off, then the audio should be a little bit better.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, the bond, the paperwork's been filed with ETS insurance. It's going to be a Fidelity bond. I do not have the paperwork of approval yet.
Okay.
So my ask would be that if it could be an approval with the condition that it's been filed. He's been in touch with the planning board and with David. It's in process. We're just waiting for it to be finalized.
Dotting I's and crossing T's, Sue, is that possible?
So you can, what I would do is just you can vote to approve the language of the decision and then just hold off on signing the decision and the plan until it's in hand.
Okay. All right, we may run into problems here. Tim, you may have to step in for me as I'm leaving the country this weekend. So
Sure.
I don't know. I don't know how long the bond will take to actually, be finalized so that we can sign the decision then.
Okay.
All right, so that,
And
that,
the conversation, I called the board to try to get it and was.
I'm sorry, Mr. Fusco, it's hard to understand you.
The other option, Ray, would be to, issue the approval subject to the condition on the bond, being satisfactory for, from an issuer and amount perspective and a form perspective.
Yeah, let's touch upon that real quick. Thank you, Tim. Mr. Fusco, are we okay with the number that we've got here? That's not in contention, is it?
Nope, it is not in contention, no. I'm good with
Okay.
the number.
Good. All right. So it's just a matter of paperwork then. Good.
Correct.
And planning board members, did you get a chance to take a look at the maintenance agreement?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody have any problems with the maintenance agreement?
No, I would say the comments from town council were expected and de minimis and, no problem.
Right.
Oh, I love that language there, de minimis. Yeah.
Made Tim smile.
Yeah. It made me smile too.
Mhm.
Oh, good.
Okay, that's good. I don't see a need to go through that language. Do you guys?
No,
No.
I don't.
Okay. Very good. Sue, do we have to vote on accepting that? I don't think so, not on that one.
No, it's accepted when you accept the language of just the language.
When we accept the language of the decision? Is that what you were saying, Susan? Sue?
Yes,
Yeah, okay. So then that brings us to the, okay, I got two other little things here. I've got the language of the decision and I've got the easement and private road maintenance covenant. Did planning board members have a chance to take a look at that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. All right. And basically, since this is a meeting where there may be people not familiar with this sort of thing, this is basically just stating that the road being created is a private road, that the lots that use that private road, the owners of those lots are responsible for the maintenance of that private road. That the private road will be constructed properly, and that they can't ever ask the town of West Newbury to maintain or plow that private road. Good?
yep,
Yes.
Okay, and then the stormwater management operation maintenance, that's just, that's been looked through by the attorneys. That's pretty standard now that we've got those bylaws in place, right?
Right. In fact, I do have a question on this. At the head of this document, current one, it talks about the Department of Public Works. Is that correct?
yeah, that's, actually, she changed it to the town engineer or another appropriate.
Oh, I don't have, this is not the very latest one.
Yeah, you have an earlier version.
Okay, because
Yeah.
that didn't seem right to me. Okay, thank you.
You're
Yeah, there was a
welcome.
version with track changes that came through that had various items.
Yes, I
changes.
saw that and I told myself I wouldn't screw that up, but there you go.
And then there's also language in there, I believe, that doesn't just say owners of the lots, but it's like owners,
Harrison
Well-
sign.
yeah, all the representatives, blah, blah, blah. So it's, so once it transfers ownership, it's still, everything still applies.
Good. Okay, and I don't think we have to vote on this one either, do we, Sue?
Do not.
Okay, and so then that brings us to the decision. And let's see if I've got the right one up here. So there's this tends to be a bit long, but it's fairly standard. Reviewing what's been done and what to date. And then we have these waivers. I just thought I'd slow down here, planning board, make sure that we're good on the waivers.
Yeah, we've reviewed these
Been
at
through
the last
this.
meeting.
Excuse me, Brian?
I think we did review these at a prior meeting.
Yeah,
That comment was more for the record than anything.
yeah, fair enough. And we did approve the subdivision last month, but we do have to vote on this. Is that correct, Sue?
Yes.
So once again, we can vote on this now to approve it and just not sign off on it, right? Until the performance bond is in place.
You can do that, or you could, as
One more
Tim
time.
you could also do as Tim suggested and sign and make it contingent on receiving those items being reviewed to the board's satisfaction.
What does it say, Sue, about the bond? Sorry. Where's the bond covered in this?
Just, I think it's almost the last, it might be the last one. Next to the last one. Let's see.
Which page?
It's not there.
Not under recording. Got to be before this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's before that. Oh, it's not in administration.
Well, we can just, Tim, you're the lawyer here. Why don't you make a motion for us?
I would move to let's see, just 1 second, Ray. I just want to check that. I thought the bond was covered in this document.
Here,
Recording in progress.
performance guarantee.
Yeah,
Prior to endorsement of the planning board, the applicant shall secure the construction of ways.
Oh, there's performance guarantee. Prior to endorsement, so that means we don't sign it. Right?
Correct.
Okay, yeah.
So Sue
Rather
suggests-
than change this, I think you're right, Ann. I think we should just go with this.
All right,
Right.
then
So Susan,
I'll make
Sorry.
the motion to approve the language in the Town of West Newbury certificate of vote for 125 and 171 River Road as presented here tonight, dated June 18, 2024, and modified per edits by the attorneys.
Second,
Any discussion, planning board members?
Just to clarify, so when that bond comes in and is deemed to be in good form, we will then come in and sign this. Is that correct?
yeah.
Okay.
And who's going to deem it to be in good form? Whose responsibility is that?
Town council.
Okay,
Okay, so this, in all likelihood, will be sometime next week, probably. I mean, it could be late this week, but
Right.
depends on when Mr. Fusco's can get that in. But I'm just putting the timeline out there. I think that's likely. Is there a deadline on this, Sue?
I don't believe so.
No,
You've taken your final action.
right.
Any other discussion about this? So the motion is to approve this language and the certificate of the vote. All those in favor? Ray Cook, aye.
and Bardine, aye.
Tim Cronin, I.
Brian Murphy, aye.
And it's unanimous. Thank you very much. Which brings us to the A&R at 37 Coffin Street. So if you, just so everybody's up to speed on this, we reviewed this A&R. We didn't see a problem with it in particular, but we did have, we did want to see some modifications made to the plan.
Right.
And I need to pull this up. And now suddenly I can't find it. Sue, oh, and Sue, it's difficult for you to share things, right? I think I've got it here. Let me see. No, that's the select board's packet.
So did you get modified plans?
Yes.
Okay, I've got it. I'm coming up.
Sure.
Yeah, just a sec. And let me share that here. All right, can people see this?
Yes.
So, yeah, let's jump to the plan here. I gotta do this and then I gotta zoom out. So if you recall, these lines weren't called out quite the way we wanted them called out. But now they are. And we see these lot lines to be abandoned here, dashed. And then we see the proposed lot lines here. Can you see my pointer as I do this?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. And so that's the A&R.
Yeah, I must say it's much clearer seeing the adjoining lot in its entirety there as well. So
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, this is much better. It was worth the delay, I think. Is there any further discussion on this?
well, I just want to say I can't quite. Maybe you can zoom in. Did we get the driveway in there? I
Here's
see
the existing gravel drive, which will not.
for 37.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes,
I
it's
see.
right
It's
in front of the garage. Yep.
something
right
that says
in front.
driveway. I see. Yep, got it. It was a little too small for me before. There we
There you
go.
Yeah?
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
And yeah, I'm the homeowner, so we tried to squeeze everything in on the plan.
Yep.
It's
No,
on
no, no.
one
Looks
sheet,
very.
so.
Yeah, looks good, Joe. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm sorry for the hassle of having to go back and get this done, but I'm sure that, well, no, nobody in the future is going to thank us because they won't know that we bothered. But but there it is. We know we're doing the right thing here. Planning board, any further discussion?
No.
No, plan looks good.
And you're great at this.
Thank you so much. I move that the planning board endorse this drawing as one not requiring approval under the subdivision control law.
Second.
Thank God for you, Ann.
I have to think about it every time. It's kind of pathetic, but anyway.
No, that's it's just like you wake up at 3 a.m. reciting it. Is there any further discussion? If not, then planning board members, all those in favor, Ray Cook, aye.
Ann Bardine, aye.
Ryan Murphy, aye.
Tim Cronin, aye.
Deb Hamilton, I.
It's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So just a quick question. Now that after you guys sign the Mylar, I can grab that and then I go file it with the registry.
Yes, I will, yes, and I will put that in the entry tomorrow for your signatures. Stop by whenever you can and sign that, and I will let you know as soon as all the signatures are on it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
And-
you need only 3 signatures. Is that correct, Sue?
Yes, you need to.
Yeah, I will not be back until late on Friday.
So, Tim, Deb, Ann, I ask you to hustle over there and do it so I can sign this before I leave the country.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yes.
Can I do it tonight?
Yes.
No.
I can, I'm here.
Very good. All right, then.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Joe. Good luck.
Oh, good luck.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
So the third item on our agenda, and this is where the joint meeting comes into play, is to talk about next steps for the MBTA communities legislation and where we sit. So yeah, what are our next steps here?
Hey, Ray, what do you think about taking the housing production plan out of order, just since we have Kayla here to present it? Just
That's great.
Sure.
Maybe we can cut her loose a little early.
thanks.
Perfect. Yeah, so here tonight to present the housing production plan, the draft housing production plan is Kayla from MVPC, who's been leading this initiative. And just for anyone not familiar, this has been going on for nearly a year. We've had a working group, a steering group that's kind of helped it along throughout that time. And then it was submitted to the town for final review just last week. So she's going to present that. It is posted. We'll be looking for public comments. It's posted on the website. And then in another month or so, I would expect that we would have the comments needed, make any revisions necessary, and then ask for both the select board and the planning board to review and approve before it is sent to the state.
Thank you.
Sure. I think Kayla's going to take it away. That's okay.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to share the screen.
Thank you. Let's hope the owl does its work here. Might want to go into presentation mode there.
Yeah. Ryan too.
Great.
Is that coming through for those who are remote?
We can see it, yes.
But not the, it's fine, although it's not the presentation mode, that's sometimes screwed up with multiple screens. That's okay. I think we can see it well enough.
Are you seeing the one with the next slide on the right panel?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, it's showing here in the room perfectly well, but yeah. But if it's doable, let's just go forward.
It's absolutely just fine.
Perfect, excellent.
Well, thank you all for having me here tonight. I've been really looking forward to getting this process wrapped up and move full steam ahead. So thank you for letting me come to your meeting tonight and talk a little bit about the work that we've been doing over the last several months for sure. We're definitely trying to get this process wrapped up as quickly as we can, you know, throughout the next like month or so. But we wanted to take some time here tonight to review with you all. I know that you've had a chance to take a look at the document itself. Of course, this is in draft mode right now, so this is a good opportunity for us to kind of work out the kinks a little bit, talk about any concerns that you may have. Of course, we'll have hopefully some public comments as well. So we're really looking forward to hearing your thoughts, hearing your feedback. Something I'll mention, you know, I have specific times in the presentation where I'll kind of pause for questions, but if anything catches your eye, feel free to jump in. All right, so just a quick look at our agenda. So I'm going to go over what the housing production plan is for those of you who might not be familiar. Talk a little bit about the process that we've had so far, and then we'll go through a general review of some of the main chapters. So we won't necessarily go through the document, you know, page by page, but as we go through the chapters, if there is something specific, you know, in that section that you'd like to review or take a look at, I'm happy to kind of pause and we can look into the specifics of that as well. And then of course, we'll have some time for some questions and comments after. All right, so what is a housing production plan? So a housing production plan is a document that it's a 5-year plan that really tries to help shape a vision for what a community wants to see with their future housing production. This is a statutory requirement with the state where if a community has a housing production plan and you are also working towards your affordable housing production plan goals, it can help a community have some control over 40B, what we call safe harbor status. So this is something that we definitely want to highlight as part of this document. But truly, you know, the way we kind of looked at this piece of, you know, information here is we want to kind of craft, you know, that vision and have it be a really, what's the word I'm looking for? Not wholesome, a really comprehensive, you know, vision for the community. So not necessarily just affordable housing, although that is a very big component of this document. We really just want to take a look at the town as a whole and what your housing needs are. And that can be a whole range of housing types for sure.
Let me interrupt here real quickly. I don't know if the other planning board members have this too, but we're still looking at the very first slide.
Mhm.
Yes.
Oh,
Maybe if you exit presentation mode and just scroll through it.
That would probably work.
are you still seeing the first slide?
No,
It just switched to the 4th slide. So I think we're good to go from, if we could just keep going. Yeah.
All right.
You want to minimize the tiles on the right? Just so that, because they're blocking front of the participants.
Oh,
Perfect.
okay.
Yeah. Great.
We did everything out of the way.
All right, so just to give a brief overview of the process so far. So the previous plan had expired in 2023. So we really started kind of taking this process up early in 2023, working with our great steering group with Sue over here and trying to, you know, come up with this vision for what West Newbury wants to see in the next 5 years. So this involves several different, you know, pieces of this process. We had some committee meetings. We had a couple of public engagement sessions, one virtual one and one in-person meeting. And ultimately, this leads to the review that we're going over tonight with you all. I'll talk a little bit more in depth about the next steps a little later in the presentation, but ultimately, after you've had a chance to review, we've taken some comments from you all and the public. We'll put together, you know, a final version that we all feel comfortable with, and then ultimately this will go up for a vote for both your select board and your planning board. So just a brief overview of what we included in this plan. So these are the 5 main chapters. I won't go too much into it here. We're going to go through them one by one, but this is generally what we've included in the housing production plan. So the first chapter is the community overview and finding summary. So this is a, just a basic introduction about West Newbury, giving a little bit about the history of the town. We include some of the major statistics, so it's kind of an overview. If this is the one piece of information you take out of the document, this just gives kind of a general sense of what's included in the document here. But what we really want to get into is the second chapter. So this is your demographic profile and your household trends. So this is all the data that I'm going to be talking about. So one of the first things I want to mention is population projections. Now, this might look a little different from the document you have. So in the document itself, we included West Newbury's population projections, but as you may have noticed, we had these projections that showed a decrease in population. Right. I wanted to highlight what we see in the Merrimack Valley as a whole, because overall, region-wide, we do see the population increasing. And something we just discovered the other day, we're looking at the UMass Donahue Institute's projections, which usually come out whenever there's a new census, so every 10 years. They do this calculation based on, birth rates, death rates, migration trends. It's a whole algorithm that they put together. And typically what they do is they release a version after a new census, and then those are the projections that we look at until the next census is released. Something that we actually just picked up on is earlier in the summer, they actually released new projections. We think that, and we just discovered this, so we're hoping to have a little bit more of a conversation with them. But I think one of the things that we noticed across the board, especially in our smaller towns in the region, a lot of the population projections showed pretty significant decrease in a lot of our towns. And what we were hearing across the board is that might not necessarily reflect what we feel we're seeing on the ground. So we actually took a look at some of these new projections, and we're still kind of diving into that data. So that's why I didn't necessarily want to bring it here just yet. But one of the things that we're seeing in West Newbury's case specifically is that these new projections are showing a slight increase, but then it kind of levels off a little bit. So we think that kind of aligns a lot more with what we could be seeing compared to what some of these previous projections are. The new ones took into account not just the census information, but some of the trends that we've been seeing in just the past couple years. If I had to guess as well, I think one of the things that also may have thrown the data off is some of what we saw after COVID. We think that, COVID caused a lot of shifts all over Massachusetts. And I think that may have been why they released another version, is because we've had such significant changes in the last few years. So our general impression is that these projections show a lot more of an accurate view of what we expect to see for all of our communities. We're still going to dive into that a little bit more, but I'm hoping I can talk about that a little bit further.
Can I ask you a question now, or would you prefer not? Would you prefer to wait till later, or?
No, I'm happy to take questions.
Do you know if their projections make any effort to accommodate likely climate migration?
That's a good question. I'm not 100% sure. I have to dive into, they have a methodology document that goes a little bit further in depth about what they look at. I know typically when we look at some of the factors that kind of go into that algorithm, it's a pretty typical population things like, birth rates, death rates, that kind of thing. Something that's come up in other communities is one of the things that it doesn't necessarily take a look at is zoning. So we've had several towns that said, we have new zoning changes, MBTA community zoning might change how, population goes for a lot of these communities, as well as, several communities have expanded some of their sewer capacity and might add to their development capacity, which could lead to more housing units, which could lead to an increase in population. So while we like to take a look at this as one data source as a potential projection, it's not necessarily going to show that full forecast that takes into all the factors and looks at, and considers all of those things. So I'd be curious to see that though. So I do want to dive into that a little bit more with them.
Ask questions first to Rick's point. It does talk about in the, the housing development constraints. It talks about the flood zones being limiting factors. So that's in another part of the plan. So maybe, I don't know if they used it in their calculations. But with your numbers, and I know you're avoiding the graph with West Newbury's population projections because they've changed. And that to me was, I looked at that and said, there's something wrong.
Yeah, we've noticed that too, I think.
We're not gonna
across the
lose a
board.
third of our population in the next 30 years.
Yeah, and that's why we think they updated them, because several of our communities had those concerns that it didn't seem as accurate
Yeah, I
as we
called the
thought it
town
might
hall
be.
today and I got the numbers. And the line is actually still going up at the same rate, and you're 4 years down the road.
Mhm.
So to actually come down on that graph is almost impossible as far as population. That's one. Number two would be, personal observation. Part of the problem is aging in place. What happens is there used to be faster rotation. Deb could attest to this. Families with 2, 3, 4 kids, put the kids through school and move. Now with the dynamics of real estate, older people, I won't mention anybody like myself, stay in their house with 2 people in a big old house. Or one person. That dynamic is starting to change because a lot of these people unfortunately are passing on in one way or another. And I've seen at least 2 houses in the last few weeks that had 2 people who have, the houses have transferred, and now there's families with 3 kids. So that's gonna start accelerating. I think the cycle has gotten elongated rather than, it used to be a very rapid short cycle. So I think that it should be a part of the consideration.
Absolutely. I do have a couple other data points that we talk about that a little bit, but we always like to focus on kind of that filtering effect. And depending on, you know, some of these projections and what we're seeing in communities, you know, a lot of people want to age in place in their communities. And, you know, you might see a situation where folks are what we call kind of overhoused, where you might have, you know, a couple that they have a 4 or 5 bedroom home, and of course, we do expect that some people may want to remain in their homes, especially, you know, your grandkids visiting, all that. But what we're seeing across the board is that because there's such a limited housing stock right now, especially for some of those smaller units, for folks that want to downsize, they don't have the option to, or there might be very limited options, so they might just decide, hey, it just makes more financial sense for me to stay in my
No
home.
motivation.
And then you're not seeing that filtering effect where that new family gets to move in, so that's definitely a really important part of this plan for sure. Okay. So something that we talk about as well with these population projections is the age distribution projections. I will say this is also through the UMass Donahue Institute. This also gets updated along with those population projections. We haven't had too much of a chance to dive into the age specific projections, but we do expect that these will remain pretty similar based on the trends that we're seeing across the region. So something you'll notice here, we always like to point out, you see that blue line, that 65 plus and older population. So of course that we're seeing a very significant increase, and we're also seeing a decrease in your under 20 population. This is something we kind of see across the board. You know, you have a lot of folks that, again, you know, they might want to age in place, they're staying in their communities longer. We're seeing an increase of that population, but we're also seeing, you know, fewer opportunities for new families to move in. So we're seeing a little bit of that decrease in your under 20 population. This also goes really well with your school enrollment numbers. So we do see across the board that your school enrollment, if sorry, yeah. So this is again the trend that we see, especially in a lot of our smaller towns in Merrimack Valley. School enrollment in the last 20 years has been steadily declining. And again, this really aligns with those age distribution trends that we've been seeing in the last 10 to 20 years. So again, you know, when we see that kind of lack of filtering effect in our towns, this is one of the things that we notice is that decrease in school enrollment and decrease in that under 20 population. So looking at the housing occupancy versus the, so this is actually breaking down how many people are in the household versus how many bedrooms are in the household. So this gives a general snapshot about the mismatch that we might see in a community. So as I mentioned before, you know, you might have a situation where you have a 2-person household, they might be living in that 4-bedroom home, and they're perfectly fine staying there. And of course, we want to encourage people, you know, if you want to stay in your home, of course, we want you to remain there if you'd like. But if you do want to downsize, there's a smaller amount of 1 and 2 bedroom housing units in town. So if folks want to stay in town, but they want a smaller housing unit, they're competing for a smaller amount of units. So something that we want to encourage is seeing, you know, we don't necessarily expect these numbers to be perfectly equal. But when you see a significant difference in the amount of 3 and 4 bedroom homes compared to the amount of, you know, 3 and 4 bedroom or 3 and 4 person households, that might indicate that there's a shortage of, you know, some of these smaller type of housing units. This is something that we've heard across the board. We'll get into this a little bit further when we talk about strategies later. But we've heard, you know, from community members, not just in West Newbury, but across the region, that there's a really significant lack of some of these smaller housing types. And this doesn't necessarily mean, you know, apartments or anything, but it could mean some of those, we say like starter homes, but we actually like to refer to it as right-sized homes, because it might be referring to a smaller home type where it might be appealing for, yeah, maybe a younger couple just getting their, you know, their lives started. But it also might be an older couple that, you know, they want to move out of their larger home and into a smaller unit. So really want to focus more that term right-sized housing. So taking a look at some of your local housing conditions, there's a little bit more data here. Looking at your permitting data from the last 20 years, this has actually remained very steady. We've seen approximately, I think, 14 to 16 new homes, new single family homes built every single year. We have seen an increase in some of these two-family homes, which is actually, I think, kind of unique to West Newbury, is that you allow two-family by right across town. So that's really interesting to see, and it's a little different than we've seen in other communities. They might not see too many of those. We usually see a lot more of the single-family housing types, but it's really great to encourage some of those two-family, those duplex home types as well. So
Just a question, about that, and actually, Sue, you would have the most insight on this property. How much of that corresponds to, you know, things like Ocean Meadow, or, well, of course, that's even farther back, but, you know, the open space preservation developments, which allowed, you know, almost by default, include two.
And the smaller units like Deer Run and anyone that's trying to do something more than, you know, trying to maximize the space. They're looking at 2 bedrooms, and obviously there's a market for them because they keep going.
I also want to ask, when projecting forward, you know, we just passed the ADU. So you mentioned two-family by right. We now have also accessory dwelling unit by right. Did you consider that in your projections?
So these housing permits, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, I think these are just looking at, you know, single family, two family. I don't think these include ADUs.
No, they couldn't, because ADUs we just approved it, Brad. Yeah, it's new.
So I don't think this data includes ADUs, but something that we're expecting to see, and we'll talk a little bit about ADUs in a little bit too with the strategies in here, but that might change in terms of some of those smaller kind of housing units that could be available. So and then of course, something we wanted to mention too is today the governor just signed a new housing bill, which legalizes ADUs in all single family zones across the entire state. That doesn't go into effect for about 6 more months. So we're going to be taking a look at those regulations very closely and seeing what needs to be done there. But yes, that's definitely something that we're kind of keeping in mind is, you know, with this new allowance of ADUs, you know, what that could mean for communities and allowing some of those smaller housing types for sure.
Thank you.
Well, my question is the new housing units being built now, the ones I've been seeing around town, down, you know, Ash Street and everywhere else, they're still 4 and 4s, 4 and 3s, 5 bedroom, 4 bedroom. There is nothing that I'll call right size, which is what I think you're looking for. And because the developer, he's gonna maximize his profit. That's the bottom line.
Yeah,
How do you maximize profit? You build the big things and sell them for $2 million, $1.50, instead of something for 600, 700,000, which is actually cheap in West Newbury.
Yeah, so one of the things that we see across the board, and we talk about this too when we go to different towns and talk about MBTA communities a little bit, is thinking about, you know, the cost of land nowadays to build some of these new homes and what developers are going to want to build. And the way we look at it is, you know, if you have a 1 acre plot of land, you know, very expensive land prices in Massachusetts right now. In order for a developer to get a return on their investment, if you only allow them to build a single family home on that 1 acre, they're gonna build the, $1 million, $2 million home, because that's the only thing that's gonna get them a return on their investment. If you make changes like allowing for smaller lot sizes, if you allow for multifamily type housing, that might help allow for some small, not just smaller housing units, but more affordable housing units. If a developer is able to put 4 units on a lot instead of 1 unit, they're gonna sell, they might still be a little expensive. Merrimack Valley is just generally, very pricey, especially, looking at Massachusetts compared to maybe, New Hampshire, but what we see across the board is that when we allow for those different types or smaller housing types, by having those smaller lot sizes, it might not be $1 million, $2 million, they might be in that $400,000 to $600,000 range, which still is expensive, but it's not that, $1.5 million 5-bedroom home. So the way we kind of look at this is, there's definitely strategies in here to really try to encourage some of those smaller housing types. We kind of look at this, in especially when we've talked about the HPP and also thinking about MBTA communities is, it's not just gonna be one strategy that gets us there, it's gonna be a whole combination of, allowing for different housing types, changing zoning, allowing for ADUs, and, looking at it from that big picture perspective. And it's gonna take a lot of different efforts in order to, kind of work on this massive housing crisis we're experiencing in the state, and definitely takes, it's not just West Newbury too, it's a whole statewide effort that we're seeing here for sure. So looking at some of this cost burden data, this is also an important piece of information we like to highlight. So just briefly, cost burden means that a household is paying more than 30% of their gross income towards housing. Severely cost burden means they're paying more than 50% of their gross income towards housing. So something that we're seeing in West Newbury is that a significant amount of renters are experiencing this cost burden. This is very typical compared to the rest of the region. Renters overall typically are more cost burdened than homeowners. But something we also like to highlight as well is that we do have, 1 in 5 homeowners that we see in town that are experiencing this cost burden. And that might not seem like something we think about when we think about housing cost burden. We typically think of renters, but something that we're seeing more and more is, folks that are maybe living in that 4 or 5 bedroom home. They might be, retiring, they're on a fixed income now, property taxes might be going up, and that's where we're seeing more and more folks enter into that cost burden category where they might not have been before. So this is definitely something that we keep an eye on, especially in some of our communities that are seeing that aging population. That might be something that is a concern that we wanna keep an eye on.
Does cost burden include utility costs?
Yes, I believe so. So it kind of takes into account, rent, obviously. But when we look at homeowners, it's everything from mortgage payments, property taxes, maintenance on a home. If you've lived in your home for, 40, 50 years, might see some more maintenance costs coming about for sure. So it definitely takes into consideration a lot of those factors.
And utilities.
Yeah, I believe so, yes. Another point we also like to mention is this affordability gap. So looking at the household median income in West Newbury, which is $151,000. This is higher than what we see in the rest of the Merrimack Valley, but even with that higher median household income, we're still seeing that affordability gap where that income level allows you to afford a home up to about $532,000, and that's based on interest rates, down payments, all that. However, the average home sale price in 2023 was $773,000, which leaves that significant affordability gap there for folks that are looking to buy a home. We hear across the board folks that, especially people that have lived in their community for so long, we hear all the time, well, if I try to buy my house now, I can afford it. So that's definitely something that we keep in mind is this increasing affordability gap. I know there was a lot of data, a lot of numbers, but if there's any questions, I know we've had a couple questions already, but happy to kind of take a pause for a quick second if anyone has anything.
Any planning board members have questions? It's not. All right.
So I'll briefly go over some of the housing development considerations that we're taking a look at in this document. So some of the things we look at is infrastructure and environmental constraints. So this is including things like open space protections, preservation. We look at water supply, the age and condition of infrastructure, as well as sewer capacity. And in West Newbury's case, that absence of public sewer. So these are all things that we want to take into consideration when we think about potential housing development. Some of the zoning constraints that we take a look at here as well. West Newbury, of course, has 3 residential districts in town. We also noticed that West Newbury, most of the town is attached single family homes, although very unique to West Newbury, you allow for those 2-family homes, which is great. Now with their new bylaw, we have accessory dwelling units that are allowed throughout town. And then you do allow for multifamily housing structures of 3 or 4 units. Through a special permit in residence B and C, although this is not allowed by right. And again, you know, with MBTA communities coming up, that is something that's been discussed, of course, in a lot of our communities where they might not allow multifamily housing by right anywhere in town. So definitely something that has been discussed quite thoroughly in the last couple of months. So when I talk about these housing production strategies, so this is kind of what we, you know, really want to focus on, especially from a locally led perspective. You know, we look at a lot of the data, to some extent, the data kind of is what it is. But this is something that we really want to focus on because this is something that was crafted, you know, through the stakeholder committee process, through the public engagement events we've had. So this is very unique to West Newbury. Although several communities have had very similar strategies here as well. So we see, you know, definitely a lot of regional trends here, but really want to focus on some of the highlights we have here. So the first strategy we have is activating and utilizing municipally owned property to develop housing that supports community needs. So this is like taking a look at the Mullen property, for example, and seeing the potential that we have there for potentially adding for some housing that could address some of those needs. So one of the other strategies we have is to establish some design guidelines to help facilitate the production of a variety of housing types. So this is that kind of right-sized housing we're talking about here. So thinking about, you know, smaller lot sizes, for example, and how we can accommodate for some of those smaller housing type needs. Our third strategy is to expand opportunities for direct housing financial support for residents through the Affordable Housing Trust. Something that we want to take a look at is what other communities are doing as well. You know, we're always kind of learning from each other. North Andover, for example, they partner with Bread and Roses to provide a down payment assistance program for residents in town, utilizing some of Bread and Roses funding capabilities as well as some of their CPA funds. So definitely something that we're kind of exploring is how we can expand those offerings. Along with that, we're also looking to encourage developing of housing that's affordable to both low and moderate income households. This is typically through your Affordable Housing Trust as well. Looking at partnering with, you know, those kind of nonprofit developers like Habitat for Humanity in order to expand that type of housing. Our fifth strategy here is to continue refining and prioritizing community education. One of the things that we heard when especially we came here for your in-person community session is folks are really eager to learn and they definitely want to continue those conversations. So I know that that's something, you know, we are very excited about potentially doing throughout this implementation process over the next 5 years, is really working with residents to encourage that community education. And of course, coming to chat with you all about any housing initiatives that you're interested in. And then strategy 6, similar to very many communities in the region, we're looking at achieving compliance with the MBTA communities law. This is something that, of course, has been about in depth in West Newbury in the last several months. We are not your consultants through this process, but we're still keeping an eye on the process and, you know, keeping an eye on what the rest of the region is doing as well. We're working with about half of our communities right now to get them to compliance. We've had several that have already passed theirs. A lot of them are due by the end of the year. So we're definitely, you know, getting through that process now, but West Newbury does have until the end of next year to reach compliance. So wanted to include that as a strategy here as well.
Can we jump back one slide, please?
When is it, Chair?
Yeah.
So all these strategies make sense. Thank you. It's nice to have them all in one place. I think we're already doing a lot of this. My question was strategy 2. I don't understand what these design guidelines would be, where they would live, who makes them. I mean, right now, we encourage, I guess you could say, I mean, right now duplexes are by right. And through our open space preservation development, we're encouraging smaller square footage homes. So I'm not sure where these design guidelines, who makes them and where they live and what they look like.
So one of the things that we're looking at, and maybe Sue can add some more context here for the design guidelines, but there's a new program from the state. It's called 40Y. It's something it's kind of new, so we're still taking a look at the regulations. I think they're finalizing some of those regulations on the state level. So we're really excited to dive into those once they're available. But they would essentially allow for communities to create what's called a starter home district. So this is determining, some of those lot sizes, maximum, or I think, maximum square footage for housing. Really trying to encourage some of those smaller housing types. And if communities are able to create that 40Y zone in their town, there are things like incentive payments that the state will provide to the town for encouraging that kind of housing. This is very new, so we're still kind of reviewing what that would look like, if that's something that would make sense for West Newbury. But definitely something that we're kind of keeping an eye on as a way to kind of address this strategy and work towards creating some of those smaller housing types.
I like this.
Gotcha. I'm sorry, if I could just follow up, my suggestion would be on a slide like this to add some language to consider an overlay district or new zoning that would do those things you just mentioned.
Ray, if I could.
I second
please,
that.
Ann.
Yep. Yeah, that was.
The Dachshund and Flinker designs that were proposed for the 2 properties that we're considering for the MBTA Communities program were for much more intensive development, but they were very much in keeping with the vernacular architecture of West Newbury. So in addition to focusing on singles and 2 families, I mean, we need apartments. We need buildings that accommodate families and individuals in huge numbers. So I thought, and it seems to me the Dutch and Flinker plans were very well received. They did a lot of good research and tried to make things that the town would like, and I think they did a good job.
Yeah,
I think. Well, go ahead,
I'd like
Ann.
to recognize first, Ann Bardine.
Yes, I was going to go to strategy 2 as you did, Ray. I don't think that what that describes is design guidelines. I think that's a zoning change. Just as duplexes by right and ADUs by right were zoning changes, that's a zoning change. And if it's tied to a state program, that's fine. And even if it isn't, when we did the 2-family and when we did the ADU, we did it on our own. So, but I would call it zoning changes, not design guidelines.
Yeah, yes, and I'll second that as well, or third it. When we did open space, that's a zoning change that basically encourages certain designs. So I just think it should say zone change or something to that effect. So Kayla, maybe you can wordsmith that and we can review an update on this.
And I would also, jumping back to strategy 6, as a result of the efforts through the planning board and others, you use the phrase conforms to the type of housing residents would welcome. I would say that's pretty much ready to go through what has been proposed as a as, what is it, is a zoning bylaw that would be needed to cover strategy 6 in the MBTA communities law. I'm not sure my language is quite right there, but.
Yeah, so I guess just to address the two things that were briefly mentioned, one is, you know, some of the wordsmithing and some of the edits that we're looking to see for strategy 2. This is exactly why I wanted to come and talk to you all about this plan and why it's in, you know, draft form is, you know, we want to hear from, you know, the boards and the public about, you know, what they think of these strategies and even down to, you know, some of the language in here. So very much welcome, you know, any edits that you all have. And something I'll also mention is, you know, if you leave the meeting tonight and you're home and you're thinking, oh, I wish I'd mentioned that, you know, feel free to email me and, you know, we're certainly open to, you know, continuing this process and editing this document. And of course, we'll have another version to present to you all before you take that kind of final vote later on. But definitely we'll look into changing some of that language with strategy 2. I agree that, you know, what we're talking about is a little bit more related to a zoning change compared to, you know, design guidelines. So that's definitely an easy fix right there. When it comes to MBTA communities, something that we wanted to make sure we're including with this plan, even though a lot of the work has already been done with this, you know, we haven't, you know, West Newbury hasn't passed with MBTA communities yet. It hasn't been brought to town meeting for a vote, even though a lot of that work has already been completed. We really just wanted to include this strategy, essentially to kind of give you credit for some of what you've already been working on. Even if that's going to be, you know, kind of finalized in the next like year or so, we wanted to include that to be able to show not just the town, but the state as well, that this is something that you have been working on, will continue to work on, and you'll be seeing through that process to the end.
So not really being familiar, I don't think any of us are familiar with 40Y to any degree. It sounds like, I mean, it's new to us.
We're still learning, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm not sure if what I read into what you said at the outset is being correct, but it sounds like maybe there's a maximum square footage allowed under 40Y. Is that?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember exactly what the because there's some initial language that they had put out, essentially, you know, what I remember it saying is that there's kind of a definition of a starter home, which provides some sort of guidelines for, you know, the number of bedrooms that would be in the home, the amount of square footage that would be in a home. You know, 3,000 square foot home isn't a starter unit kind of thing.
Right.
So I think that's kind of what the language talks about. But again, we're still waiting for some of those final regulations.
So it sounds like it's possible that what 40Y will do is be kind of somewhat of an amalgam of zoning change with design guidelines integrated into the zoning change.
Yes, yeah, that's why I think we weren't sure about, you know, if we want to call it design guidelines or zoning changes, because it's kind of both.
Okay.
Kind of both.
Yes.
By the way, let me interject here. The reason why this slide is drawing all this commentary right now is because this is the heart of the whole matter.
Absolutely.
And it's a great slide. And it's one that people are going to be, you know, when in the report, this is where, you know, this is going to become the dog-eared page of the report. And I think what can be done here is this is good. Maybe it goes to a table. I don't know. But one of the things that you could add to this would be some sort of indication of what, you know, where we are. So, you know, strategy 1 is something that's pending work, or that, you know, that hopefully will happen. Strategy 2 is pending. Strategy 3 is in progress. Strategy 4, depending on the specifics of how we encourage that, other than the OSPD. So in other words, this is a great slide. Thank you for getting it here to this point. And because people are going to be focused on this, it's important to have clear language that's unambiguous. So this is where a lot of the work needs to go, and something to indicate where we're at presently in West Newbury. I think it would be good.
I think that the matrix in the plan does that. I mean, it doesn't say, you know, it says ongoing 2 to 3 years, so it gives a time frame, but maybe not.
Good. Maybe forgive me. I haven't looked at the plan in that detail. I'm just seeing it tonight.
Yeah. Did you,
Yes.
Mr. Point?
Strategy one, I mean, there are several municipal properties around that they were considering. If I'm a person of detail, or I have been in the past, let's put it that way. And what I did for work. And they keep dropping the Mullen property. Of course, I'm in a butter. So the Mullen property keeps dropping up, so but we're gonna consider all municipal properties, not just the Mullen property. You keep dropping Mullen property, pretty soon the town saying, oh, it's the Mullen property, the Mullen property, the Mullen property. Okay, we gotta consider them all, not just the Mullen property.
Absolutely, and that's why we wanted to keep it a little bit more general and just focus on, you know, municipal owned properties as a whole.
It keeps mentioning Mullen, because we had a thing this spring where somebody brought a citizen's petition to throw the Mullen property into the MBTA roll-up. And
I think it's just a virtue of the acreage, it's the largest piece,
Yeah.
near town water and near the town
It
center.
was the previous intent too.
Yeah.
yeah,
It's just
because I don't know if it showed up just because it was on there from before the spring meeting or.
Even when it was purchased, that was a lot of the conversation at the time.
That's why it was bought.
Yeah, it was a significant justification when it was purchased was this potential housing.
And with the
Well, they also
location,
talked about a potential well fill down at the bottom, which didn't happen either.
Yeah. So I think it's good that it's general, but I mean, to your point, there are other parcels and the trust is looking at a lot of municipally owned parcels as well.
Right, because the town was running around buying all this open space and then. Boom, we wanna sell it.
so can I ask a question because it ties in with that? And I have two questions, I'll do the second one first.
Sure.
So as Deb said, you're looking to do, I think you said a ton of affordable housing is required.
Which is a scary thought, honestly.
Oh, and I'm not sure, that's my question. Well, no, at what point do you reach build out capacity within a town? And how, at what point do you get overbuilt? And then what are the consequences? Because water, schools, traffic, and then the thought I had, you're now gonna start impinging on properties that were purchased for open space. And parcels are gonna go there. So I think you have to look at the overall picture, and what's the goal? At the end of the day, you turn back in 50 years, what you have achieved, is it what you wanted? What are the sacrifices you're making in other areas? I've got kids, I'd love to have them live in town, I can't, and as Kayla said earlier, I couldn't afford to buy my own house today. And that's disturbing, but it doesn't mean that you've got to create 1,000 units of affordable housing. I don't know what the number is. Or what it's doing. Huh? 87. Well, those aren't affordable, no.
Well, but
That's
those aren't
MBTA.
affordable. Right,
So,
exactly.
so you're already gonna take that piece of land and put, or one of those and put a boatload of houses. At what point does the town exceed a reasonable capacity for the rural character that we've tried to maintain? I just think you need to look at it that way in the long term, so.
Well, I think that's the bottom line here, right? The state is charging us to come up with our own plan here for housing production. And, a lot of municipal land is protected and can't be developed through their different mechanisms. And the free market has already determined which lots are easily buildable and which aren't. And that's another reason why new construction's high cost, because, take a look at River Road, how much had to be done just to punch a driveway in there. So, yeah, there is build out, and I don't know how much of the projection of the population of West Newbury is, I don't know how carefully a build out assessment has been done here. But it definitely has an influence.
But again, a lot of the potential build out in the future, I anticipate would be on these large parcels that the town owns. And when you start doing that, a lot of those were purchased for open space. I think you have to be cautious with that as well.
Well, this is one of those situations where it's incumbent upon the town of West Newbury to protect open space that was bought with the intention of keeping it as open space. And I think that's been happening.
There has, we put the protection on Pipe State Hill. I was on planning board at the time. And we got an awful lot of heat about that because people said then you preclude any future other opportunities. Pike State, Mill Pond. And I said, yeah, that's the exact intent. So
Right.
that's when I'm so thrilled that we put the restriction on at the time, because I can't imagine what might happen now. And so when I look in the back of this, there's a housing site list, and it lists, Dunn's, Knapp's, Mullen, and then Dunn's Field. And I don't think I ever envisioned housing on Dunn's Field, so that kind of awakens me a little.
Yeah, and
It's just that concept. You just have to start thinking about it.
I remember driving by, Bert Knoll's property. On the way into Newburyport, which is now Ocean Meadow. So, and then, you've got property rights to consider here. If somebody owns a large parcel and they want to sell it to be developed. But when it comes to town-owned, municipally owned property, that's where the tough discussions have to happen parcel by parcel.
So the build out impact is not part of your mission on the housing production plan, correct?
Yeah, when it comes to these housing production plans, it's not a build out analysis by any means. There's definitely, I know that sometimes, especially when it comes to specific projects, they'll do build out analyses. In terms of a town-wide build out analysis to say, what's our maximum here, what's our minimum, that kind of thing. That's a lot more in depth than what we would get into with this type of plan. But it's definitely something that we've had come up in several towns. We've had towns that want to look at, their capacity, their sewer capacity, for example. And, if we were to expand things, how would that look? And so I think as we kind of look more towards the implementation phase in kind of the next 5 years, that's definitely something that we might want to explore is, now that we've got this plan together, we know what we're kind of working towards, we can maybe spend some more time on some more in-depth analysis.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just wanna, anybody listening remotely have comments? We had a few people other than planning board members, just wanna give everybody a chance. If you wanna make a comment or question, please feel free to speak up. Go ahead in the meantime.
I think one of the problems, the Mullen property, yes, I'm in a butter, there's some new families down Prospect Street with kids now. They're all, they're popping in quite a bit right down there. And they were talking about putting high density housing and putting the street in my backyard. Let's put it that way, I'm not against housing, but high density housing is a problem, because then the traffic popping down to Church Street, the police department has a hard enough time trying to control Church Street. You go down there at 5 o'clock in the morning, you can clock people doing 70 miles an hour. With that, it's in the traffic control, of course, with your additional housing, you're gonna have to have additional policemen and all that whole infrastructure thing. But I think high density housing, they're talking about Dunn and Knapp's is gonna create a traffic situation in town, which is actually bad enough now with the bridge being repaired and those those tandem axles running up Church Street and Bridge Street like it's
Yeah, so those kinds of impacts are something we're actually gonna talk about after this tonight.
Yeah,
We're looking at doing a study to evaluate those impacts, so.
Yeah.
This is more a conceptual plan of housing for the next 5 years, and it's very prescribed what we have to look at, so. But do you wanna stick around and discuss the rest of them?
I just wanna chip in a couple of factoids on this chapter 40Y. I hadn't heard anything about it until it showed up in the plan a few weeks ago, and haven't done a lot of research. There's no regulations yet, and that's really where the details are gonna be, but it's a new section of Mass General Law. It's starter home zoning districts, and provides for basically either overlay zoning or changing the underlying zoning for minimum densities of 4 units per acre. The homes have a maximum square footage of 1,850 square feet, so it's clearly intended to promote more modestly sized housing, although it's still
That's pretty.
pretty good sized house. What else? It provides that at least 50% of the homes have to be 3 or more bedrooms, so it's, you know, kind of geared toward more family housing. It sets an affordability of 10%, affordable up to 110% of area median income, which, as we know, doesn't count toward your planned production goals, because that's got to be 80% of area median income. So it seems like a little bit discordant with the other housing policy, which is very typical. I've been watching Massachusetts housing policy for 25 years, and they very often do not align, and that's part of why us local officials get so frustrated with the state. But anyhow, I just want to share and then the other thing it says is financial incentives that are the same as the 40R. So the upfront adoption based on the number of zoned units you're creating, and then a per unit state incentive of $3,000 per unit. So it's something once the regs come out, we'll definitely want to look at, but I certainly wouldn't want to say, it's going to make sense. And we worked with Kayla to kind of wordsmith that section a little bit to make a commitment to look at it once the regs are out, but not to.
There you go.
Any outcome.
We're still taking a look at it.
Of course.
We're awaiting those regulations.
Yeah.
We're keeping an eye out. So,
Yeah, definitely.
Is that the
Yeah,
final?
$3,000 per unit. I was just looking over the 40Y online. Yeah.
You mean the bonus?
To the front door.
Yeah.
It's a one-time.
Yeah, there's a one-time payment upon adoption of the district, and then the second payment of the 3,000 per unit actually built. And yeah, that's the money. I mean, as I think you guys know, I did a lot of work with 40R over the years. The money is not the reason towns do it or not. They do it if it's good land use policy, the money is a bonus. But I've been involved with 13 approved 40Rs. I've never seen a community do it for the money. It's just like gravy. They do it if it makes sense and if it's consistent with their land use plans.
We like to mention that too, that it's more of that kind of bonus. It's not necessarily the reason to do it. It's really to encourage, the housing that a community might need. It's just a nice extra incentive there, so.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so next steps here, first of all, I just want to, again, thank you all so much for having me here tonight and for reviewing this very lengthy document, and it's a lot of information, but of course, I really do appreciate all of your input. I will definitely go back and make some edits, especially to some of that language we talked about with some of the strategies. If there's anything else that you think of, later on in the next couple weeks, feel free to reach out to me. We will be coming back to the planning board and select board to review that kind of final document. And of course, you will have an opportunity to, further discuss and then take an ultimate vote on adopting the document. Once we have those approvals, then the plan would be sent to the Massachusetts Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. They will have their chance to review it, and hopefully we'll also get their approval. We have done our due diligence to make sure that this fits into the guidelines that the state gave us to make sure we don't have any hiccups along the approval process that way, but we will be sending that off to the state. One other thing to note as well, we did put this document together in just like a basic Word document for the purpose of showing you the content. But once we kind of have that final language, drafted and we have, we all feel comfortable with it, we will design the document so it looks nice and pretty and have some nice pictures of West Newbury in there. So this is not the final version is all I wanted to share. And then after that, once we get the approval from you all and the state, we're really looking forward to spending the next 5 years implementing this plan.
So in terms of logistics, how are we gonna manage if we get public comment or comments from these boards? It seems kind of unwieldy for us to all email you individually. So, I mean, but what did you have in mind for that?
So I would start putting together a document that just a matrix that says you know, what the recommended change is, so I've started that, and I have got comments, from someone who reviewed it online, and I already sent them to her, but I'm happy to start that document, and I would just say, anyone who gets that, funnel it to the land,
To Jen.
to Jen at this point.
Yeah. Okay.
To do that, because it would be much easier, if it all funnels through one Jen.
Jen Geary, the new land services administrator. And
like-
also, if
I'd
we
like to
have
recognize
individual
Ann
comments-
Bardine, if we could.
Yes, thanks, Ray.
Just-
I have a question or a comment for the planning board. I did read the whole plan and I do have a whole list of page by page comments. I wondered if, I know you'll be away at the next meeting, Ray, but maybe we could do it in your absence or else later. If we could have a planning board agenda item to go through the document page by page and come up with a sort of a conformed list of comments from the planning board. Rather than individually doing that. Is that appropriate or of interest?
I think
Yeah.
for the planning board, I think that would be necessary.
Okay,
Because, you know, not only do we have to approve it, but the town itself is relying on us to be careful about what goes into the document.
right. So I don't know what the time frame is, but I think we should do that sooner rather than later if we have.
Yes,
Yeah,
I think,
the question is whether we would wait until our early September meeting when I believe you'll be back, Ray,
Do that.
to do that. I don't know what time maybe Kayla can tell us, you know, is that an undue time constraint for her or whatnot?
I'm on your timeline, so if you are planning on meeting, early September, I will also say, of course, I do welcome individual comments, but I think, if the planning board wants to have a chance to kind of meet together and, if there are some edits that, typically as I've gone through this process, there haven't been too many conflicting edits. But that has come up a couple times, so, if the planning board wants to have a chance to meet, and, collectively, come up with some of those, suggested changes, that is, more than welcome, so, I'm totally happy to work on your timeline if you're looking to meet in, you said early September. So ideally, we typically do, the planning board reviews it, and of course, the select board has the chance to review it and submit your comments as well. Once we have that kind of finalized draft that we're all happy with, typically the planning board would be the first body to vote on it, and then it would go to the select board to vote. So that timeline works. We have, in terms of my absolute timeline, we have until the end of the year, just for our grant that we have to do this. But I'm sure that we'll be able to get that done throughout the fall.
Is that submittal or is that approval?
Submittal, yeah, we might, the state, of course, we all know sometimes the state can take a while to look at things, so. As long as, we're working on trying to get these at least submitted to the state by the end of the year.
Okay, good.
and I really hesitate to bring this up, but I feel like I really have to. And that's that, I'm not sure it's in Ann will be able to tell me if it's in there since she's read it carefully. But where do we state what our mission is here? Where do we state what the goal is for all these strategies in this production plan? I mean, it's fine to say, population is going to be increasing. How do we accommodate these people? And I hesitate to mention all this because some of this is because we need to satisfy the state. But I mean, fundamentally, you get down to the point of what does the town of West Newbury want? What are the goals? And unless that's in the, right at the very beginning of the document, then I don't know that we'll have the commitment to actually implement the strategies within the document.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're doing this document because it's a state requirement. And we've done 2 of these, at least. Could be the third one, but I mean, I think that's laudable to state that, it's our best effort and our intent to move forward. But I think I just caution, an outright commitment to something. This is a document that lays out a strategy. And there's many other moving parts to make that strategy happen, a number of which are not in the planning board's control.
Right. I mean, but this is why I hesitate to bring it up because, what the overall goal is up to the town as a whole.
Well,
Right.
the town doesn't vote on this document. We're the town's representatives voting on it.
Yes, I understand that,
select
but the real big thing here, which could, result in endless hours of discussion and objection and all that kind of stuff. And what was it you, Rick, or was it Chris? I mean, what's the goal here for the town of West Newbury? Because we have a natural conflict between everybody's desire to preserve the rural character and
Well, it was
also.
me who said it, Ray, I agree with what you're saying, because without that goal, you've got a document that's pretty hollow. It doesn't accomplish what you might want.
Well, the document is to comply with the state requirement. I mean, that's what we're doing. So I don't think we should
That's
make.
complete BS, and just vote what you got tonight. I mean,
So, yeah, this is my point, and this is why I hesitate to mention it. Brian, I think, is being pragmatic here. Wendy is being pragmatic here. That, we have to provide something to the state.
Mhm.
And that's why I hesitate to bring it up. And I think it's fine to go ahead without trying to tackle this gigantic question. But it is the issue, the bottom line. None of the strategies make any sense unless it's a strategy to accomplish a goal. So therefore you have to establish what your goals are. And that is really hard.
But isn't the goal sort of it's a bit of a moving target. It's to acknowledge that the population may grow. It's to acknowledge that people who want to move here might like to have a greater option than exists now of the type of housing that they would move to. It's part of the goal that we do want to preserve open space and rural character. It's a balancing act. Some of this is just the private property rights. If some private property owner comes into the office tomorrow and files a 60 house subdivision, there's not a darn thing we can do about it. Our zoning is our zoning. So narrowly defined, the planning board's mandate might be to create zoning that mirrors as possible, the preservation of property rights, the preservation of open space, and the desire of people to have a home. I mean, I don't know. We're trying to juggle it all.
And the planning board does have that mission statement, right?
Yeah.
Well,
I'm just saying that maybe something like that belongs at the beginning of this document.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not only a planning board document, though.
Yeah,
Agreed.
we have done in the last ones that we've done here. We've had goals in there that we have met. We've created an affordable housing trust. We've created zoning to allow for accessory dwelling units. So, and there's probably others I'm not even thinking of at the moment.
Inclusionary.
And so, I think yes, it can be a little squishy, but there are gains that we have made to accomplish this. I don't see, it's part of the roadmap to get there. So I don't see it as a one and done. I just don't.
That's fine. I just wanted to say my little bit there.
Sure. No, appreciate it.
If I could offer just one observation, and Kayla made this point right up front, I think in your very first slide, but I think it's worth just making sure everyone knows. I think everyone does, but it is a pragmatic document. The housing production plan. The pragmatic goal is that if production takes place at or above the affordable unit, threshold, the 0.5% or the 1%, if you have a housing production plan approved by the state, that production translates to either 1 year or 2 years of so-called safe harbor under 40B. If that production takes place and you do not have an approved housing production plan, you do not get a safe harbor. So at the end of the day, that is really the goal. It's a very pragmatic goal. It's driven by a state mandate, both on the planning side and on the production thresholds, that, you know, I was a little surprised and really kind of a little heartened that tonight's discussion didn't get too bogged down into production numbers, because those are not realistic for the town of West Newbury. You know, and so I think at a staff level, our objective would be, I think, exactly what the boards have been talking about, which is something that, if you look at it more qualitatively, sets out strategies that actually are viable and supported by the two boards. Implementing those, we know, is a whole different thing, but we don't want to see the boards adopt something that the day it's voted, you don't have ownership of. We want you to, you know, to push and pull and tweak it till you get it to a point where you feel comfortable that it sets out strategies that you feel are something you would intend to at least explore, if not pursue.
Absolutely. I think this might be very oversimplifying it, but at the end of the day, the goal of the housing production plan is to produce housing. And the document and all the information in it, you know, looking at the data and some of those trends to kind of inform the background information, ultimately leading to the strategies of, you know, how we want to get there. You know, at the end of the day, each housing production plan, the basic goal is we want to produce housing. How do we want to go about that? And that's where we really see the local differences. You know, we're doing this in every single community in our region, all 15. It's been a very interesting process to see how each town and city has handled it. And I think at the end of the day, you know, we just need to focus on, you know, that kind of main overarching goal of, you know, we want to see more housing produced, but what that looks like in every community is going to be very different. And that's where we really see, you know, those very local specific goals come into play. That's definitely kind of the heart of this plan. So I think that's something, you know, again, we appreciate all of the, you know, comments and edits that we want to see, because especially those strategies are kind of the main, you know, guiding goals for this document that we want to focus on in the next 5 years. But just, you know, again, very oversimplification of what this document is, but I think at the end of the day, you know, that's kind of why we're doing this is, you know, not just for having potentially that safe harbor status, but really just showing that vision of, you know, if we're going to produce housing, what do we want it to look like? What do we want to see? And showing the state what that's going to be. So.
Thank you.
Can we just go
Taylor.
back to,
Nice job.
can we just go back, you know, just from a process standpoint, what we're going to do? It sounds like Sue is compiling some comments. And I'm with you. I have, you know, some specific comments. It sounds like you have more. I'm sure the other members do as well. So is the idea that maybe we communicate those to Sue and she can
She's only here 2 more days.
2 more days. Okay.
But there'll be another town planner.
Somebody else will do them.
Get it started.
But I think if we at least get our own board comments in one place, I mean, let's not have, you know, 80 million sources of comments. I'm trying to
No,
minimize.
I think.
Right, me too.
It's useful. Our conversations are useful, very useful.
Yeah.
So, you know.
The timing, I guess, is what I'm wondering about.
The timing is tricky. If there's a hard deadline, then I know you guys, you know me, I trust you guys to tackle this on the 20th, but if it's, let's see, first Tuesday in September.
September
3rd.
Yeah.
That would, if there's no particular urgency and it would accommodate, then we can put that on the agenda for September 3rd.
That makes sense to me, Ray. When you're back, right? You're back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, God willing.
Yeah. Watch your step over there.
I know, yeah.
Too much yelling, no.
Oh, you're riding. I forgot. You're bike riding. That's right.
Yeah, listen, I changed the fluid in the hydraulic brakes and I went over all that. There's a good chance I'll make it back.
Along here, folks.
Okay.
I have a
Yeah,
lot of business.
Thank you,
Yes,
Kayla. Good job.
Yes, thank you.
You have anything you need from us, right? Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was good, Carol. Thank you.
Thank you, Kayla.
Forward to comments.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
All right,
Okay.
Ray, shall we go back on the agenda?
Yeah,
then?
MBTA community next steps. Who wants to
All right.
start off the discussion here?
Well, we have a proposal here. I think we should start there. And this is to look at the economic impact of the, two proposed sites. Any comments from Rick or Chris on this before we jump into the planning board?
Let me make sure that the planning board understands this. They've located somebody who can do a financial analysis.
Yep.
The impact. And I looked it over. It seems reasonable to me. I don't know if any other planning board members, are you guys up to speed on this?
I
Yeah.
did see that, yep.
Other
Okay.
proposal, yep.
Were there any other proposals received?
Or
That was
sought.
the only one requested. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the only one requested.
So is this?
No,
pretty
I
much-
mean, was that the only proposal received?
From that bidder, in other words, in that.
Well,
Only,
any bidders?
only one bidder was solicited, is what I think they're saying.
Yes,
Is that
correct,
what you're
yes.
saying? I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
This,
So my question is this a boilerplate kind of thing that to have a lump sum project is, we generally don't like to do that. So
Right.
is it that predictable that a lump sum makes sense for the town?
It is somewhat predictable in this case because they have a very formulaic way of crunching the numbers. This is not about, this is really about numbers. They have sources, they put them into their assumption, they put in their assumptions and out comes a number. Either it's fiscally, you know, positive or it's neutral or negative. So it is, I would say it is based on obviously the size of, you know, the project that he has to do, or the, you know, the number of units, et cetera, but it is typical that they would give you a flat fee to do that work.
Okay. And you?
and
you have-
I'm curious, let's say we go ahead with this and approve this. Will they be looking at the impact of the maximum number of units that potentially could be created, even if it were at great expense?
They will do both. They will do that, they
There
will
you
base
go.
it on the 87 and then they will do it on the more likely 35 to 40.
Thank you.
They will run both sets of numbers. This is a firm that was recommended by Dodson Flinker, that having had worked with them multiple times. And when I contacted them and I presented it to Angus, Angus is very familiar with this firm as well.
I'd worked with him once, back in 2007. He was actually a subcontractor to the firm I was working with, and we were very pleased with the work product. And there's definitely other firms that work in this arena, but definitely Frank Mahady, he's been at it a long time. He's seasoned, he knows what he's doing. And he's one thing I really like, and I think you got the same impression from your conversation. He's a very straight shooter. He's like, this is what the data says. He's not an advocate. He's just like, this is what the data shows. And
I guess my only question or concern is that given the level of scrutiny and the number of people that said, well, what's the impact? I would just want to make sure that to only have one quote feels a little troublesome. He may be the best in the business, but if people say, well, how many quotes did you get? Can we really trust this analysis? I want to be able to answer those questions. I don't know if it's practical to try to get another quote or reasonable.
Don't they usually, public?
So this discussion is between the boards. I will take questions when we're done. Planning board, do you have any thoughts on this? Only having one quote and whether that's an issue or not?
Go ahead, Ray.
Oh, I'm sorry, Brian. I am reassured by this particular individual's reputation and by the confidence that Sue and Angus have in him. So I'm okay with that. But I agree with you. We need to be able to go to the people in West Newbury and say, look, this is a good analysis from a reliable person who doesn't have any dogs in the fight. These are the numbers that this firm came up with. And I'm comfortable with the proposal, but Now, Brian, you were going to say something?
Yeah, no, yes, I too am comfortable knowing that the recommendation was from the consultant that had been hired by the town, and also that Angus has prior experience with him. There'll always be a naysayer who questions whether you go with the low bid, why didn't you go with the high bid, or God knows what. So I'm all for it. We need to have this done.
Yeah,
Yes.
I was just going to add that I do feel a sense of urgency here to keep things moving forward.
Right.
And I think this is a way to do that. And
Another way to think about it is if this had been part of the original proposal, Dodson and Flinker might well have hired these people as a subcontractor, in which case we would not have put it out to a separate bid. So if we think of it that way, that's somewhat helpful to me. It's a qualifications-based thing, not a numbers.
Absolutely.
fair point.
Yeah,
Stephen?
I just had one observation that, I think it seems like a very reasonable amount, for the work that they're going to do. I'm just wondering what the draft report will look like. We just need to make sure that there's enough information in it that people can, really follow it, the general public can follow it, because there was a lot of interest in getting this analysis done. And we just don't want a series of tables, and that kind of thing. We need, some sort of narrative. They talk about a narrative analysis, but I just don't, I haven't seen their work product before. So I just hope that, there's enough meat in it there that, we can actually present it and it answers people's questions.
I had the same concern, Tim, because it says a technical memorandum,
Right.
including tables. And so that, to me, seems like it would be kind of brief, which is good, but
It should be, that's why. It should be analytical, he's just gonna take a bunch of numbers and crunch them and show you where you're gonna be.
Yeah, but you don't want it, Chris, in a summary way where they lump in all, public safety and, all these other numbers together and they're coming up, with a table. It should, kind of describe their methodology, right? How they do it and what they take into
I'm
account.
sure it'll do that, but it'll sort of be like the town warrant every year. There's all the backup, but you sort of distill it down to what the voters need to see. They look at the line item budget, and they just look for any anomaly, and then they beat it up, so it's gonna be
Right.
the same with something like this.
Oh, yeah,
And
no,
I just want to see a set of numbers that I can follow and that make sense and that I can believe.
How bad is
Yeah.
it? How good is it? We don't know.
I get it. I just wonder, maybe they can give us an example of one of these just to give us some assurance of what's in there.
I'm happy to ask for their recommended, a sample that might be
Okay,
similar. I think we're of a scale that's quite small compared to what's typical,
True.
but I'm happy to at least give you a sense of what the work product is.
What's
Okay.
the time?
8 to 10 weeks.
Right, so what time frame is the town looking to have this in, by town meeting in the fall?
Well, that's.
Not for the fall, no.
Okay,
There's nothing going to town meeting in the fall on this.
okay, just making sure that's not what it is, because otherwise you're.
No.
Okay.
But I'd still like to
So-
have it this fall because we need to do a big rollout and this is just a
Yeah,
tiny.
this fall, but not for fall town meeting, because that's like by. Yeah,
It's like even 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah, right. So, the resident asked a question about bidding. It is exempt from bidding. It's not something that's required to be bid. With that said, I would have no objection of whatsoever of, getting other proposals. I was just tooling around. There's a Mass Association Consulting Planners website that's it's not every firm in the state because they have to pay a modest fee to be members, but most of the consulting firms are members. And there's definitely a number of firms that do this kind of work. Kathleen McCabe, RKG. Judy's not gonna, it's way too small.
I know, that's what I've already
Right.
done a little homework,
Yeah.
and the numbers were much higher, so.
Yeah, but if but I hear loud and clear what the
Yeah.
point that's being made is that.
Wise, it's not gonna hurt us to get more. quotes.
Yeah, just cause, someone could undermine it for that reason, that would be a shame, because, all of these people are professionals, they know what they're doing, so. I wouldn't have, I know you're only here another couple of days, but, it is a pretty boilerplate thing. It's not something that involves a lot of, us drafting a custom scope like we've had to do for some other projects, so. I can work with.
I think we got two issues here. One is, what's their bid? How much is it gonna cost us to get the analysis? But in my mind, what's more important than that is how do the people in town here know that that this is good work? And so then we get to the reputation of the person doing the analysis or so, if you've got 3 bids in, who are people gonna have the most faith in when the numbers come up with? Because, if you did 4 or 5 different analyses, that the results are gonna be a little different between each analysis.
And go back to what Brian said, no matter who you hire, there are gonna be naysayers. So, and to pick, my concern, you pick a low bid, they're gonna say, well, of course you got.
I'm not suggesting we pick a low, bid. Just think for, transparency to say we solicit more than 1 bid, and it's not only who the architect recommended.
If you're gonna do that, have them submit a copy of their work too,
Yeah.
so we can see
Yeah, I think
that.
that would be good, a copy of the report, yeah.
I'm gonna be bold here and ask other planning board members to weigh in, but I'm perfectly comfortable with the select board figuring out how they want to go about doing this, hiring somebody and getting the analysis done. I'm fine with trusting you guys to do a good job with that. It strikes me as unwieldy to have both boards working to get it done. If you're not comfortable going with the proposal that's in front of us tonight. Brian?
No, I'm fine with that, especially with, the absence of, with Sue's departure. And yes, I think that makes sense. We have Angus with his expertise to just provide some guidance as may be needed. So
Ann, Tim, Deb?
Yeah, that's fine with me. It's still not quite clear to me how that's going to reassure people about the qualifications of the firms.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is I would trust Angus
Yes.
and the select board
Right.
to
If they want to make
hire on a consultant that everybody can have faith in.
right. Yeah, that's fine.
Yep,
Tim, Deb?
I'm on board with that. Yes. Thank you for the reasons that, you and Brian mentioned.
And Deb, did I see you kind of prevaricating there a
Yeah,
little bit?
I don't have an opinion, Ray. I defer to people who know more about this than I do.
So,
All
select board, are you okay taking the reins here and getting the person hired and getting the work done?
Yes.
However you see fit?
Yeah, and I do think there's some benefit to that in terms of perception of the public. Kind of an independent review, by the select board, or their consultant. So, yeah, that's great.
Absolutely.
All right.
Okay, that's how we'll go on that. We'll reach out to a couple of other firms and we'll keep the board apprised. We'll probably have some new information by the time you meet a week from Thursday.
Okay, great.
If not new proposals necessarily, we'll at least have a sense of the market and who might have bandwidth for it on our timeline. The next, we had included in the materials for tonight, the water memo, and I think that would be a good next item for discussion is whether the boards would envision additional analysis on water and or traffic. I think that's what Sue and I were hoping to get some guidance on that tonight.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Go ahead, Ann.
I can't imagine there's any more data about water to be gathered. It's
correct.
pretty darn complete.
I agree.
Mapping, its fire flows, it is what it is. It's numbers, it's math.
Well, I think Angus may not be clear on this. The financial analysis that they're going after about the impact to the community wasn't specifically going to include a detailed traffic analysis or a water supply analysis.
Right, but didn't we get a water supply analysis from our water consultants months ago? I mean, I've seen it.
Yeah, I'm
We
just
did-
not sure that will satisfy the people who had concerns about it. It's kind of very, fire flow-ish, and so, I don't know.
What, I guess I would say, what else do you want? You certainly don't want to bring in another engineer. And, what, it seems fine to me.
There was a follow-up that was part of it. Maybe it's what Sue did that said, okay, this is the typical, and according to the water department, usage per person per day, and adding this many more people would up it to this many gallons, and that's still under the threshold. And the numbers I found in that report were compelling, and
Yeah, I think Sue's analysis was more compelling than Dan Howard, so, yeah,
I mean, I think it's all there.
okay.
Do we want the water department to write something about it? I mean, that seems like a slippery slope.
No, that's not what I'm suggesting.
Okay.
And so what about traffic? I do think that was one of the items that was raised, and I was hoping that NVPC could maybe help us with that, but I'm not sure if that's.
Well,
in the cards.
I think it's completely understandable, but people are always concerned about impacts on traffic. But these sorts of developments don't have a huge impact on the traffic.
I could tell you right now exactly how it's going to read. It's minimal impact, 30 to 40 units, negligible traffic flows. Yes, there'll be some 2 or 3 cars waiting at 7 o'clock in the morning, getting onto 113, and we'll pay $10, $15, $20,000 for that. But if that's can be covered under with the funds that are available, then I guess we should do it.
Yeah,
We've seen these before.
It's the sort of thing, exactly. And we saw it with Ocean Meadow, we saw it with Daly, we saw it with Follinsby.
Right.
Time
Yeah,
after
they're all
time
about
after
that
time.
size, and they all say the same thing.
It's the same thing. Yes.
Yeah, but and you understand this, the crux of the thing is that in some sort of public hearing, public meeting, a town meeting, whatever, if I stand up and say that, nobody will believe me.
Right.
Well, they might believe you, they won't believe me. So
Right.
you're the professor.
Yeah, that's right.
And I feel like it's money well spent to do some kind of analysis. I don't know that we want to spend $20,000 on it, but just to.
I think MVPC, if we can do it with LTA, that's the way we gotta go.
Yeah.
Yes, we should use MVPC for sure.
Yeah.
Good.
Chris, do you have
And
any-
once again, planning board, is it all right with you if the selectmen handle this? Excuse me, if the select board handles this without having to check with us first? Yeah,
Yes.
I think you've got that consensus, so.
Yes.
Great.
Yes,
We
if I
we
can be of
trust
any
the
help.
select board with Angus to get that information covered.
Okay, great. Anything else on that?
Wendy, I'm happy to write to Gerard if you wish, requesting it, or you can write him directly, whatever you wish.
Okay, great, thank you.
Brian, I'm happy for you to reach out to Gerard, just if you would copy me, just so we're in sync on that. And I would suggest that if we do go with MVPC, that we just do it through a separate contract, not through LTA, because we have a pretty robust project list for LTA. And
Yeah, I'll just, yeah,
Well,
I'll get a
LTA
dialogue
side.
with him, and yeah, my
and
note
we
will
can
be
use
very,
Yeah.
my note will be
Thank you,
high
Brian.
level, copied to you, and we'll let him respond.
Thank you,
Great.
Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, and I think they, certainly have the capability. Whether they have the capacity is a different thing. I know we've recently invited 2 proposals from them for the commercial vehicle exclusions, one for River Road, one for Ash Street. So anyhow, if they have capacity, that's great, but we'll see.
We'll find out. Sure.
I suspect this wouldn't be a big lift for them. Especially if I'm just going to be straight about it, if we're talking about, rezoning property along 113.
Yeah,
I
they
think
just
you're
they
right.
have a lot going on. They
Yeah, we
have
also have,
a lot going on.
We also, I agree with what you said, Ray. We also have a very good current baseline of data because we have the Route 113 corridor study that's coming right along. And we have traffic counts that we're taking this spring, both kind of at the town lines as well as at 3 key intersections along the 113. So there's very good data already available. The traffic generation for the numbers for these type of developments is pretty known, and the existing traffic is known. So yeah, I don't think it's a big lift.
What are those 3 intersections?
We identified them in the corridor study. It was, I believe it was Maple Bridge and
Grainer?
I don't think it was Crane Neck because that's already signalized, but I'd have to check. It was, I think it might have been Maple
Gardens.
Bridge and might have been Bachelor. Anyhow, but
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, other items we need to discuss, right?
I have a couple on
Church,
MBTA.
Bridge and Church.
Go ahead, Brian.
That time.
Yeah, okay.
Stop.
So, you know, it's likely that we're going to, I suspect, need some additional funds for Dodson and Flinker, and perhaps with them or with another group to help with a rollout of, you know, an educational process, December, January, etc., all geared towards Springtown meeting with this. And to that end, do we need to request additional monies at Fall Town meeting? Or could this fall under the article that had been previously approved?
I think the intent was to include those kind of expenditures, but it depends how much you're thinking you need. I mean, what was our total, the total of the warrant? Was it
I think it was
50?
75,
Oh, 75.
wasn't it? I think it was
I
75.
don't recall.
Yeah.
How much are you thinking, Brian?
Well, I don't really have a number, and I don't, you know, I mean, I can guesstimate, you know, we could probably get a hold of Dodson and Flinker, but I'm sure it'll be somewhere between 10 and 20. That'd be my guess. If they have to come back for you know, inputs, and then there was some talk of another group. I think Sue can weigh in on this, that helped one of the other towns with outreach. And we may need to do a mailing to people just to get folks as up to speed as possible so that we have well-informed townspeople at Springtown meeting. And that's going to cost something.
Yeah, for sure.
And we don't have to come up with that tonight, but I just wanted to put that out there that, you know, whenever the warrant closes for the Fall Town meeting, if we had to go that route, we need to keep that in mind.
Yeah, we had 75,000 was the article. So we've talked about 17 tonight for the economic, maybe 10 for traffic. I think there'll be plenty of money there.
At least 48,
Yeah.
those are the numbers.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys can discuss that amongst yourselves and let us know. And if that's okay, I'm sure there'll be enough there. You know,
Yeah, I think that was the intent, because we're gonna need help to get this over the finish line for sure.
There's no doubt in my mind, yes.
Yeah, okay. Great. So the legal, is that on the agenda?
It is, and I note that we're already at 9 o'clock here.
Come on, you lightweight.
This is early for us. We got a couple hours.
Well, I just.
We have other things still to discuss too.
Yeah, the legal thing is item 5, and we've got 8 items on the agenda. There are 2 issues here, and I don't think we need to tackle them both tonight. But the first one, Angus and I spoke to each other earlier before this meeting tonight. And it's something that he was in discussions with Sue about as well. And that's about legal fees for a specific project and how they're covered. Angus, do you want to kind of summarize it?
Well, I had, written up the email and I think I sent that to the full planning board and I definitely shared it with my board. So, yeah, I mean, it's basically when there's legal reviews incurred as a direct result of proposed development. It would be my expectation those would be paid from the escrow account rather than the town's legal budget. That's not how it's been done over the years. I think that's largely due to the transition from in-house counsel, who was a staff person, who people could kind of, an hour of his time didn't cost the town directly, as opposed to now that we're billed by the hour. So, seems pretty straightforward to me, and I did try to make the memo clear. I'm not referring to things like legal opinions the planning board may request related to development. So for instance, with Eagles Nest, I know there were questions about definitions of frontage and corners, and that's the kind of thing the board needs that support from town council to do its job. Those to me are fully appropriate costs for the taxpayer. It's more the things like the review of condominium docs, review of easements, review of conservation restrictions, street acceptance plans, those kinds of things. I would expect that those, would be paid out of escrow, and if that is the expectation, I would just suggest that whenever the next development comes in, that the escrow amount required of the developer be increased some amount to account for that.
Yeah.
Yes, I think we can't do that now for things underway for which that was not disclosed to the applicant already. That would be my sort of ethical position. On the other hand, our subdivision regulations, I don't know, is it page, I don't know, it's some citation, call out that what happens in the escrow account, and it talks about things like engineers and other kinds of review fees. I think this is a matter of the board amending its subdivision regs to change that paragraph to include legal fees. Parenthetically, road acceptance, blah, 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 condominium. If it's explicit in the regulations, when somebody submits an application, I'm fine with it, but I don't think we can do it in arrears. That's my feeling.
And I believe it was Angus's, in my opinion, that this would be something going forward for new applications.
I think it's easily done by amending our subdivision regulations.
Brian, did you?
I agree. Nope.
And Tim?
Totally agree.
It makes sense to me. Yes. Yep. It's a very
And
good
Deb?
suggestion.
Fine.
There you go, Angus. That's not too hard.
Good, that was super easy.
Well, so that's something to Sue. I assume you're kind of you're leaving a breadcrumb trail for whoever comes along later on.
I am.
Thank you so much.
On a summary. I've got a summary of projects for her, and I will add this to it.
Thank you.
Of course.
And then, the other thing that Angus and I, and this is one of my little pet things, is about, what happens if there's a conflict of opinion between, say, the planning board and the select board and that whole business. But I don't think we need to discuss that tonight. So we can have that discussion in the future. I don't know if anybody on the select board wants to weigh in on that. Or am I being too brief in my summary here?
That's a little obtuse. I don't know what you're talking about, Ray.
You mean with respect to getting council opinion?
Right. So let's say that, I'll go back on.
You're breaking up.
Picking up.
Thinks that that's a violation. Excuse me?
Couldn't hear you.
Yeah.
You're breaking up.
Oh, yeah. I just got a little notice that my internet connection is unstable. So my internet connection matches me. But the idea that there might be some issue that came up where the two boards had a disagreement. And these are two elected boards. And there's nothing out there that I'm worried about happening going forward. So this is just a hypothetical, purely hypothetical. But if the planning board and the select board were in a disagreement and the planning board wanted to use council to take a look at it, the way I understand it is the select board could just say no. And that represents to me a potential conflict. That's all. I don't know if any board member wants to weigh in briefly on that, whether it be planning board or select board. And maybe it's just me. Maybe there's no problem whatsoever. I don't know.
I thought as an elected board, you had a right to get their own counsel, don't they?
No.
But how do we pay it? Pay that council?
You got deep pockets, Ann. I just remember years ago.
I think there might be a nuance here, in terms of getting an opinion from town council, as opposed to getting special counsel, getting their own attorney. The town has one entity that's charged under statute with managing the town's legal affairs, and that's the select board. So, Ray and I talked this over on Friday, and, theoretically, if the planning board wanted to engage outside counsel, the select board couldn't authorize that, but the select board would need to authorize that. It's not, as far as getting an opinion from council, that's something that's very routine.
Yeah, and that doesn't require the board, the select board or the town manager to accede to that.
It does, but we would never not allow that.
Yeah.
It's really just a matter of ensuring that we're aware of the requests sent to council, because we've got to manage the overall legal budget. So.
And let's be clear, it's a horrible situation where you have two town entities and they get in a legal battle. Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Well, this has happened in the past.
Yeah.
A number of years ago, the planning board had to sue the zoning board of appeals. And the town council was tasked with defending the zoning board. We hired an outside attorney. It did happen. So I think that probably is what you're referring to, Ray, type of thing.
That type of thing. And also the language in the bylaws say that we can, but the select board has to approve it. So,
You mean the policy or the bylaw?
Policy.
So you're referring to the select board policy, right, Ray? There's not a bylaw that governs this?
Well, there is a bylaw, and the policy was written, was amended to reflect the bylaw. What happened, my first couple of months on the job, I wrote a memo to the then Board of Selectmen, making them aware there was a discrepancy between the town bylaws, services of town council bylaw, and the board's policy. Because the bylaws say that any elected board by majority vote of the board can initiate a request to council. The policy at the time said something different. So I brought that discrepancy to the attention of the board, and I said, do you want to amend the policy to reflect the bylaw, or amend the bylaw to reflect the policy? They said they wanted to amend the bylaw to reflect the policy. So that was brought to the Springtown meeting in 2019. That was the one with 900 voters with the school overrun. And there was a resident who spoke against it, and it ultimately didn't pass. So the bylaw remains as it has been for decades. So subsequent to that, the policy was amended to basically show deference to the bylaw. So that's what I put in your packet, is the policy that the select board adopted or amended in 2021. So, which is what we follow.
So the request can be initiated by a majority vote, but it's still up to the select board.
Well, it says, let's see, must be approved by the town manager or the chair of the board, or that the chair is unavailable, another member. And that, if you go back to and I think that was right when you were maybe brand new on the board when that was voted, July 2021. But the spirit of that was basically just, even it's not no one's ever been denied a request to get an opinion from council, but there's no way, you know, if there's a mismatch between, kind of the authority to manage the legal budget. So if my office and your board doesn't have the authority to oversee the legal budget, but we're held accountable if the legal budget is overspent, that's profoundly unfair. We set the legal budget based on, you know, the town's, you know, and it's not cheap. And as you know, and planning board members, just so you're aware, the select board receive all the council invoices in their packet every month. So they have full transparency on what, you know, what's driving the legal costs. So I think the policy was intended to basically preserve some budgetary oversight. And I will say, and Sue can attest to this, as could other department heads, that I'll sometimes work with them on with staff on the crafting of a request to make sure it's as targeted as possible and that the backup is provided, because that makes most efficient use of town council's time. If you and you've seen the requests I send to council there, we basically spoon feed them. Here are the facts, here's the backup information, this is the question, and allow them to be laser focused on a specific question, because I don't want to burn time on a lot of back and forth with council trying to understand the question. So I do make sure that questions are clearly written before they go to council.
And just for the record, I mean, I, for one, as a resident of the town, really appreciate that. You know, I mean, it's not easy. I'm sure it's a lot of work on your part. I'm just a little concerned about the idea that there's a disagreement between the boards and there's no way for the planning board, being an elected body and backed up by the bylaw, because the change was not approved, that we could still be denied the ability to seek an independent counsel in a tough situation in the future. But I'm not sure that we can resolve this tonight. It's just a concern that I have. And, you know, whether a bylaw is trumps policy, that sort of thing, that it might be something good to work out over the next year or so that we can avoid a potential problem in the distant future.
Ray, there is a nuance in what you said, and I just want to make clear. So this policy is to do with getting an opinion from town council. You referred to getting independent counsel. Those are two very different things. And a few years ago, I think it was the Water Commission did, look into, they were taking the position that they could get independent legal counsel. And we did get a written opinion from council on that. And the opinion was that no, under the state statute, the select board are charged with it. You know, town of West Newbury is a municipal corporation. It's a corporate entity. There's a chief elected body, that's the select board, and they are charged with managing town council. So, getting an opinion from council is one thing. Getting independent counsel is a totally different thing, and that's not what this policy is to do with. That is something that would require the select board to authorize.
All right, okay. You're more up to speed on the technical language here. I'm just saying that let's say there's a situation where a select board, there's a potential conflict. Select board goes and gets an opinion from town council, and the planning board disagrees with that opinion. An attorney can't represent both sides of an argument ethically, right?
Sure.
They try a lot of times, you pay them enough.
Yeah. So like I said, this is a tough thing, and there's nothing on the docket that's coming up. So I don't think this is something that has to be resolved anytime soon. It's just something that's always bothered me. And maybe there's a way to go forward to resolve this one way or other, or maybe not. Maybe it's just going to stay the way it is, and hopefully it won't be a problem again. I don't know.
I'm kind of hoping it's not a problem. I think the town is running pretty well in synchronization on most facets, and when I read this policy earlier today, my biggest takeaway is what it does is provides for the town manager to get an estimate. Simply because, as Angus said, sometimes we get these bills and I won't mention where it came from, but some of them are extraordinary and weren't really known or approved ahead of time. And that's what we have to understand. We can't let the budget for the legal services run out of control.
I understand that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mentioned, when we spoke on Friday, Ray, I had mentioned to you that in FY '24, specifically because we were, seeing the trends in the legal costs and seeing that we were on track to overspend, there was at least one item that we specifically deferred action until July because we didn't want to blow the FY '24 budget. And just for the record, we did keep the legal budget within budget. We did not overspend it, but that's because we had to make management decisions. And in at least one instance, there might have been more, we basically postponed referring something to council that was a matter of town interest. And as I look back at the, and that tied into the earlier issue of not wanting to basically subsidize, developers and pay their costs. So, but we resolved that, but that's the kind of thing where, we want to make sure that that legal budget is managed and that we don't have to, postpone legal questions of interest to the town in order to stay within budget. We have to be able to manage the legal budget. And I think we've done a very good job at that, but that's partly
which I completely appreciate, which is great. I think there's two things here. There's the ability to manage a budget, and then there's this philosophical thing that's not a pressing issue. So I don't want to drag this on and on. I just quickly ask if any of the planning board members have any other thoughts before we move on.
No.
Doesn't look like it, and maybe it's a non-issue. Brian?
No, I think it is an issue, but I think we'll defer to another day.
There you go. Deb, I don't want to leave you out of this.
I'm fine. I'm listening.
Okay, all right, very good. Well, thank you. And Angus, please know that, and select board, that staying within budget is critical, and I understand that that's a mandate, and I appreciate all you do with respect to that.
Understood. Thank you, Ray.
Yeah.
All right, so you're done with us?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. How do we?
We're not done with Sue, though.
So we can
Sue is here,
continue
so we'll
our
just.
meeting.
So we can adjourn.
Motion.
I moved and we adjourn.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, adjourned at 9:15.
Enjoy the rest of your meeting. Have a
Thank
good
you.
night.
You.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, folks. Appreciate it.